I'm going to introduce Brendan. Brendan first learned to program using Apple Basic on an Apple II Plus when he was 12. He loves teaching Swift and has taught this programming language on behalf of Apple and Hackergal, and now through his own company, SwiftKids, where he teaches a wide variety of audiences ranging from middle school students, grad students, and teachers. He is one of the organizers of NSCoderTO and SwiftTO, that's Canada's biggest event dedicated to the Swift programming language. And that's how I know Brendan. He loves the outdoors and is often found fishing, canoeing, and hiking. His newest hobby is learning to tie his own flies for fly fishing. So with that, I hand it over to you to stop this. And it's all yours.
Thanks, Navati. Okay, let me pull up my keynote here. Okay. Keynote going. Okay, so welcome everybody to intro, or I just call it intro to Git or intro to Git and GitHub with Xcode. Navati already introduced me, but I run a company called SwiftKids, which I'll get to, excuse me, which I'll talk a little bit about at the end of the session. We teach Swift and tech in a lot of different ways that you might be interested in hearing about. Our website is swiftkids.online. If you have any questions at the end of this, you can always email me at brendan@swiftkids.ca. Notice the difference is that the website's .online and my email is .ca, which is kind of a long story, but I won't bore you with that. And on social media, you can find us at the SwiftKids on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. But to be honest, we aren't super active on Twitter. It's mostly Instagram and Facebook where you'll find us posting content. So everyone here is likely here because they want to learn a little bit about Git version control, or specifically using Git with Xcode. So let's just see. Sorry, I got to close this so I can see the chat, but I wanted to see how familiar is everybody with using Git or GitHub? Not too much. Pretty familiar. Beginner. I know I could do with a refresher. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let me just pull the keynote back up again here. Okay, so this is going to have a little bit for everybody, I feel. We're going to run through a little bit of the history of Git that you may not know. We're going to talk about version control in general. We're going to talk about the basics of Git, and then I'm going to demo how to use GitHub with Xcode, and then we'll talk a little bit about some more stuff after that. So first up, what is version control? Well, version control is a system that keeps track of changes to a set of files over time. It allows you to recall specific versions at a later time. So that's great, but why use it? There's a lot of really important reasons why you would want to use version control. First up, it lets you revert files back to a previous state, which can be helpful, but even more helpful is it allows you to revert entire projects back to a previous state. I don't know if you're a junior developer or any developer really, you probably have a lot of apps on your desktop where you've got cool project 1 and then cool project 2 and cool project 3, and you've just you've got different variations of that same project in different folders, right? So using a version control system will allow you to better manage all your files and that kind of thing. So it also solves the problem of kind of acting as a backup, and that you can revert back to previous states, like I mentioned. It allows you to review changes over time. So maybe you're the team lead and you want to go back and look at different aspects of the project, or even if you're just a developer, that probably would come in handy too. You can go back and look at how the app progressed from day 1 all the way to its current state. You can see who last modified something. Like, so say you're working on a project and you have to, there's this feature in your app and you want to talk to the person who actually built that feature, but you don't know who it is. Well, you'll be able to dig in through the history in your in Git, and it'll tell you who was the last person to modify something or who created it, or excuse me, you'll be able to see that whole history. And it's also helpful to see by who and when an issue was introduced. So if you want to get on somebody's case and get them to fix a bug or something like that, you'll be able to go back and see who actually committed a specific line of code. So that brings us to what is Git. I'll talk a little bit about the history of Git. In 2002, so I want to mention that Linux started in 1991, not 2002, but the way I worded this, it kind of makes it sound like Linux started in 2002. But the Linux kernel project began using a proprietary version control system called BitKeeper. In 2005, the relationship between the Linux dev community and BitKeeper broke down. So Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux, decided to build his own tool. The goals of this project, which went on to become Git later, was that he wanted something that was fast. He needed something that had a simple design, which is, to be honest, once you've been using Git for a while, that's kind of debatable, because I don't find Git to be the easiest version control system out there. There's some things that are really kind of strange the way they're implemented, but that was the intent, was to have a simple design. And it needed strong support for nonlinear development. So what that means is thousands of parallel branches. Like, obviously, if you can imagine Linux, the Linux kernel, which is a project worked on by thousands of people around the world, they all need to be able to work independently and be able to have their own different branches of the project while still working in version control. It also needed to be fully distributed, which we're going to talk about in the next slide. And it needed to be able to handle huge projects like the Linux kernel, obviously. So I mentioned distributed. So what is a distributed version control system? Originally, there was what was called a central version control system, where each user works off a central server. Now, in most of my career, I worked for the Ministry of Education, and we, for a really, really far too long period of time, used something called Visual SourceSafe, which was a Microsoft product, which has since been replaced, but it was it came out around, I don't know when it came out, but its last version was when VB6 was out, which was even before .NET. So that probably, I don't know, how long has .NET been out for now, but quite a while. So with central VCS, each user works on a central server, and the admin can see everything that is going on at once. That was really useful when everyone went into the office to work, and your server was in the office and everything, and you had no problems. But with a distributed version control system, what this allows you to do is, if the main server goes down, the whole thing could be restored from any distributed copy. Before you start working, each user clones a full copy of the repository. So as you can see here, we have our server computer, which would be either a third-party service like GitHub or Bitbucket, or a self-hosted service that your company uses. And then each individual has a fully complete backup or clone of the Git repository. So what are the key takeaways here? The most important things is that Git keeps tracks of changes, and it synchronizes code between multiple people. So let's talk a little bit about your workflow when you're working with Git. So I mentioned the term repository, but what is a repository? Sometimes called a repo. It's simply just a collection of code. If you've got a project and you want all that code together as one, then you would put that all in one repo. Let's talk a little bit about the elements of the Git workflow. There's going to be 4 spots where your code is going to reside when you're working with Git. First, you're going to have the working directory, which is literally the directory on your computer where you're making changes to the files. And then you have the staging area, which is when you're ready to send your code when you're ready to commit your code, you would put all the necessary files in the staging area. And then after that, you would then commit those files to your local repo, which is still on your local computer, but it's actually within the Git database. And then finally, you've got your remote repo, which is the one that everyone has access to, which is on that remote server we talked about. So one thing I just want to mention here is that sometimes the local repos are referred to as the head, and the remote repo is referred to as main. So on my next slide, you'll see that the remote repo is referred to as master, which is what they used to call the remote repo, but Microsoft made the decision to kind of move away from that idea of there being a slave and a master and everything like that. So they decided to just call it main. So basically, when you're working with Git, here are all the main commands you're going to use. If you want to take something from your working directory and put it in your staging area, sorry, first I should mention that originally Git was a command line tool. We're not going to really cover any of the command line stuff here. I find it really kind of a pain in the butt to use, and it's not really all that nice. So which is why I like doing a presentation on using Xcode, because I find Xcode integration is really excellent. But these listed here are the actual Git command line commands that you would be using if you're using Git. So you've got your working directory, and say you want to add a bunch of files to the staging area, so you would use the command git add. Then when you're ready to send them to the local repo, you use the command git commit. And then once you're happy with your work and you're ready for the rest of the team to see it, you would use what's called the git push. Say you want to pull code that somebody else created, you would use the command git fetch, and that would reconcile what's on the remote repo with your local repo. And then when you want to take what's in your local repo and you want to reconcile that with what's in your working directory, you would use the git merge command. And if you want to do that in one fell swoop and go from the remote repo directly to your working directory, you would use git pull. So let's try it out. First thing I want to talk about, so if you have Xcode installed on your computer, you're not going to need this because you're going to have Git installed by default. But if you're ever in a different environment and you want to check which version of Git you have installed, you would use the command git -- version. That's all the command line we're going to learn tonight. So first up, what you would need to do is you're going to have to create a GitHub account, but I've already got one, so I'm not going to walk you through that. But this is me logged into my GitHub account. So as you can see here, there's a bunch of information in the center panel. On the left side, you can see a bunch of projects I've worked on over the years with different people, some students, SwiftTOs in there, that kind of thing. Let me show you what my profile page looks like too. So this is kind of neat. It shows you a graph of all the different contributions you've made within the past year. It's also got a bunch of, your latest projects that you can pin. Here I've got a robot I built with my daughter. I was using Git just as like a document version control system here, just as a document tracker for a project I was working on. I built a Alexa skill a few years back. And then for my students, just this last semester, I created some demo code on how to use GC virtual control, how to create a virtual controller for your iOS application. So if you're interested, you can follow me at github.com/BrendanCMiller. Once you've got your account created and everything, what you're going to want to do is, let's say you want to clone somebody else's repo to work on that with them. So I'm going to go back to here, go to my repositories, and I'm going to pick this one here, edible plant identifier, which is a project I was working on that would obviously, it's a core ML project that you can use to identify edible plants. So what we want to do is we'll go up here and we'll say, oh, sorry, I forgot, got ahead of myself. What we have to do first is create a personal access token, which is kind of like a one-time use password that you can assign specific privileges to, just so Xcode doesn't have full reign, or not necessarily Xcode, but like whatever tool you're using doesn't have full reign on your GitHub account. You can kind of limit what access that app has. So click on, if you didn't see that, you click on settings here, go down to developer settings, click on personal access tokens. And then we'll say generate new token. We'll give it a name. We'll call it demo October. And we'll set expiration. We'll leave it at 30 days. You can set a wide range there. And then you decide which permissions you want to grant this access token. So for us, all we really want is to be able to access the repo. So I'm just going to click repo. There's other stuff here that we're not all that concerned about. So we'll say generate token. So then here we go. It's created my token for me. I'm going to click on this little thing here. I'm just going to copy it to my clipboard. Then I'm going to open up Xcode. So here I am in Xcode. And before I start using Git, what I need to do is I go down to preferences. And then when I'm on the accounts tab, I would click the plus button here, scroll down and pick GitHub, say continue. And then I would put in my email address, and then I would paste that token that we copied off the GitHub website. But we don't need to do that because I've already got an access token working. So now let's go back to my repo. I'll show you how to clone that. Go to editable plant again. We'll click up here to go code. So what we want is the HTTPS option. We'll just use this icon here again to copy it. And then let's go back to Xcode. So you can either do this, you can clone from this image or from this screen here, or you can go up in source control and you can say clone. And then as you can see, these are all of the different repos that I have access to with different accounts that I've logged into. So I'll just go here. I paste in what I copied from GitHub, and we'll verify. Then what we want to do is we're going to pick main, because that's obviously the main branch that we're working with. And I'll say clone. Then I'll just put it somewhere in my documents folder. We'll call it test October. And we'll say create, and we'll clone it into this folder here. So there we go. We've got it cloned. So now this is that folder I created there that you saw a second ago. That was your working directory. Now this is the project that I pulled directly from GitHub, but this is on my local machine. So when you're in Xcode, if you want to work with your files, you want to use this navigator here, the source control navigator. So click on that. And then you have two tabs here. You have changes, which shows all the files that have changed. Then you have your different repos. So there's a lot of different things there we won't cover. But what I'm going to do now is walk you through how to do your first commit. So let's go to the app delegate. Yeah.
Brendan, sorry, I don't mean to disturb you, but could you increase the font size just a little bit?
Oh yeah, for sure. Let me just, I forget how to do that in Xcode. Let's see, is it?
You can just maximize your.
There we go. Okay. Now we'll say test commit, and then we'll save it, and we'll come back to our source control. And now you can see that the app delegate file has been modified in your list of local changes, and you can tell it's been modified because it has an M here, and if it's new, it would have an A. And also you can see that in this the project navigator 2. If you're on this panel, you see it has an M beside it. So if we're ready to commit that, what we want to do is we'll go to the source control in the top menu, and we'll say commit. So here again, it shows all of the modified files, but we only have that one file checked. We're not concerned about all of those. And then we've got, so you can put in a test. So here's a little tip for you. If you're working with version control, always have a comment with your commit, just so people have a clue as to what it's about. That's super helpful. Instead of people having to dig through your code and trying to figure out what exactly it is that you changed, you can, we'll just say updated app delegate. So I'm going to cheat a little bit here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I know my code is good, right? Nobody writes bad code. My code is good. So what I'm going to do is instead of pushing it just to my local, instead of committing it rather to my local, I'm going to push right to the main. So here now you see it says commit one file and push. So I'll click that. And then that's done. And we'll go to edible plant identifier. And now you can see this has been updated here. It says update app delegate. And that's what's super helpful about that is you can see like, you can quickly browse when you're in a folder and you can see what files were affected or which folders were affected within that folder because they would all have the same commit message. So if we click into edible plant identifier, you can see the message there again. We'll click in app delegate. And then there you go. You can see that code we just committed. Okay, so now let me jump back to Keynote. We did our first commit. So now we're going to talk a little bit about branching. So what is branching? I'm sure you've heard that term before. Branching in Git is a function that is used to create an independent, similar copy of the current repo, but for use for a different purpose. So quite often, it could be a bug fix, or it could be a different version. We're going to talk about different branching strategies in a bit, but ultimately that's what it is. If you need to work on something separate from the main branch or from the trunk, you would create a branch. So why is branching necessary? Well, it allows you to work on a new feature independently of your team without introducing conflicting code changes, which it goes without saying that's super helpful. So there's two different branching strategies that an organization would adopt. The first one is called GitHub Flow, which is trunk based. And this is where you create branches off the trunk, which is that main branch we were talking about. You create branches specifically just for a feature, like say you want to add a new button or something like that, then you would create a branch, you would update it, and then you would merge it back into the trunk. This is super popular with startups and small projects where maybe the team isn't really huge, just a couple people working on it, and they don't really have a lot of time to have this really elaborate branching strategy that you're going to see next. So the second one we're going to talk about is Git Flow, which is feature-based. Multiple branches coexist where you have a master or a main, you have develop, and then you have hotfix. And this is going to vary from organization to organization, depending on how they set it up. But that's the key three branches there. Features are built off the develop branch. And then every once in a while, the develop branch, when it's been tested, it gets merged back into that master branch. And this is traditionally used at big companies and for big projects. So visually, this is GitHub Flow, where we have our master branch. And again, I apologize. These are old images that are using the term master, not main. So at this point here, you would create a feature branch, and then you would add all your commits. You would talk it over with your team, review your commits, and then you would deploy and merge it back to the master, where then it would be built and deployed. Now, okay, this is like I swear this is one of the simplest diagrams I could find for this. I apologize. So basically you have your master on the right side, you have your hotfix branch, you have your release branch, you have your develop branch, and then you have feature branches. So if you look at this blue version called 0.1, that would get brought over to develop if it's the beginning of the project. And then as time goes on, people are starting to add features, which are the pink dots, and then those are going to get merged back into the yellow. And then every once in a while, when you're happy and you want to do a release, then those get merged into the release branch. And then when you're going to push to the public, then you would merge it back to the blue branch. So branching is super easy in Xcode. So let me just demo that now. Let's pull up the project again. So what you want to do is when you're in your project, click on repositories, and then here you have your branches. Right now, this is our local. We only have the main one. So we'll right click on it. We'll say new branch from main. We'll give it a name. We'll call it cool new feature. And we'll say create. Oh, sorry. I keep forgetting that you're not allowed spaces. There you go. I think I use that name for a branch every time, and I forget that there's no spaces allowed. But so then you click create, and we've got our cool new feature. And what you see is that Xcode has already made that your current branch. So then you can work on that, and then ultimately, when you want to merge, back into main, you'd pick here, and then you would say merge. You would say merge. Well, you do it the opposite. You would merge cool new feature into main. But yeah, that's basically it. So let's go back to the keynote. That's it for the presentation. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Swift Kids before we go. So Swift Kids is an organization with the goal of enriching kids' lives and preparing them for the future. Demystifying the complexities of technology, we guide them through the fundamentals of programming while teaching them skills they can use in and outside of programming. Our vision is to strengthen a community of young app developers, empowering them to thrive in an era of digital creativity. Our mission is to inspire and educate youth across all communities by creating an environment that fosters the ability to code together using unique and interactive real-world techniques. So what does Swift Kids do? Well, we've got a lot of stuff going on, to be honest. You can check it out again at swiftkids.online. Our first course ever was Intro to Coding, which is a STEAM and Swift based course using Swift Playgrounds. Ideal age for that would be 11 to 15. Then after that, we developed a course called iOS Development, which is in 2 parts, and its ideal age range would be 13 to 18. Focuses more strictly on just iOS development and learning Swift itself, not really too much STEAM stuff. But we talk about game development. We learn Git, those types of things. And then just this semester, we launched Advanced iOS, which is really I'm super excited for this course because it's going to be more advanced. It's more for the older kids. It's targeting like late high school or even university. We're using the official Apple books for learning iOS development, and this is the university level book. We also offer Swift certification. So I don't know how many people are aware, but there actually is a Swift certification. There's 2 Swift certifications you can obtain. And Swift Kids is the only organization in Canada which currently can proctor that certification. So if anybody is interested in getting a Swift certification, then send me an email and I could proctor that exam for you. It's really affordable. It's not like a lot of those certifications where they charge, like the Microsoft certifications, they charge hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and you got to take thousands of dollars worth of courses and everything like that. It's not like that at all. It's definitely a lot cheaper. We also offer school-based workshops, and if it sounds like everybody's from other parts of the world, but in Ontario we have something called Specialist High Skills Major in high school, and we also run a co-op program for that. So if you have a kid who is in SHSM and you're interested in bringing an iOS development co-op program to your school, you could reach out to me for that. Also, we're playing around with the idea of offering adult classes in 2023. So if you are interested in that, shoot me an email and let me know. I mean, I'm not going to hold you to it, but just let me know that there's some interest. I'm trying to really gauge interest in that at this point. And with that being said, what I want to do is offer everybody who attended today, if you have any kids who you would like to enroll in one of our classes, I'm going to offer 20% off all classes using the code WWC Mobile. So that's up to $120 off, not $120 off for all classes, but they're all of varying prices. But yeah, so just as a thanks today for showing up, you guys can use that coupon code. if you want to keep tabs on what we're up to, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at the Swift Kids. So does anybody have any questions?
Hey, thank you so much, Brendan, for that presentation and
no problem.
The graphics that you shared. We do have a few questions in here. So Jay Kumar is asking, do we need to use a separate personal access token on a new Mac, or if we have multiple machines?
You don't, but the thing is, if you copy it and then you navigate from that window, you can't go back and look at it again. So that would require you to like store it somewhere, which is not kind of defeating the purpose of having a personal access token if you're storing it somewhere on your computer, you know what I mean? So ideally you would just create one for every computer or that kind of thing. So but yeah, it does kind of become a pain in the butt when all your access tokens start expiring, and then you have to go and regenerate them. But yeah, I think it's probably the safest way to do it, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or yeah, like to keep in mind, because yeah, if you didn't store it, you don't remember the token, or yeah, then you have to regenerate. It can get a bit painful, but yeah, it's for security.
For sure.
So
for sure.
Yeah,
I see Newthras mentioned they're interested in adult classes. Yeah, just shoot me an email and we can have a discussion on that, and maybe we can figure something out, or I'll at the very least let you know if we do launch those in 2023. So
yeah, we can share your email address, and I'm just going to share the Swift Kids web page in the meantime. So yeah, so Wendy is also saying that would be great to have adult classes. Yeah, I think before I transition into iOS, like I would also think this is pretty cool to have. So yeah, there is interest. This is your sign.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, thanks, Wendy, for letting me know. It's too bad. It used to be, there was in Toronto anyways, there was a lot of different in-person schools you could go to learn iOS development, like I'm blanking on the name. I forget the name of that big boot camp. A lot of boot camps that did iOS, but now they seem to be Lighthouse Labs. Yeah. So now they seem to be focusing on data science and front end development and that kind of thing. But I mean, there's still
mobile.
Yeah, there still is that huge appetite for iOS developers, though. Like, don't let me discourage anybody by saying that. It's just they don't seem to be offered at local schools as much anymore.
Yeah, it's good to know. And yeah, we have some more questions. There's one on, which branching strategy do you prefer for your personal projects?
I definitely prefer GitHub Flow. To be honest, I've never worked in an environment that uses Git Flow, but it just gives me a headache thinking about it, to be honest. I suppose if you're the developer, really, if you're working in the Git Flow environment, there's going to be somebody managing all of the switching from development to master and all that type of stuff. Someone's going to take care of that stuff. You as a developer, all you really have to care about is going from the orange to the pink in this example. So I guess as a developer, it doesn't make much of a difference, but like trying to wrap your head around it just seems, it's on any project I've worked on, it seems like it's been more work than necessary. I definitely prefer GitHub Flow, where you just create a branch specifically for a feature.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense only if it's like a larger project. I've seen it being used for larger projects, but yeah, for personal projects, yeah, that's so cool. Like they have they sound similar, of course, because Git and GitHub.
It's kind of confusing. And I don't know, I mean, the GitHub Flow worked or existed before GitHub existed, so I don't know what the other terms are for it, but it's not new to GitHub, but and neither are new to GitHub really. It's just terms that have been adopted, I guess.
Yeah, and Wendy also said that they started our certification program, but it was very out of date and never got to finish. So
was that like at a physical school, or was that online, or what was that, Wendy?
Online.
Okay, yeah. That's the trouble. Like a lot of people have approached me and said like you should do something on Udemy or something like that, but it's just so much work to create all that video content, and then 4 or 5 years later it's going to be out of date and you're going to have to redo it anyway. So I feel like what SwiftKids offers is a lot more hands-on, and I like being able I like being in that close contact with the students rather than like just creating a bunch of videos and selling them and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's getting harder, but tons and tons of resources online to learn. Like if you're, lots of books, lots of, Ray Wenderlich and the Meta iOS course on Coursera. Okay, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize. Yeah, Sheridan has a whole degree devoted to mobile programming, actually, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, but
Yeah.
so what you're saying is it's kind of outdated too. That's too bad.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. There are a lot of things that that is offered is outdated. School already can be pretty outdated, and then yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. We have another question on the workflow. So like, how do you do a release workflow if you are using a trunk-based approach?
So sorry, the question was, how do you do, could you repeat that?
How do you do a release workflow if you are using a trunk-based approach? So what would the release workflow look like with a trunk-based approach?
So like you're not talking about iOS development, you're talking about like deploying to cloud servers and that kind of thing, I guess. You know what? It would be just as if you're pushing out an app, really. You've got your hot fixes there, you've got your main releases, that kind of thing. Not really sure if it's cloud-based, if it makes a difference, other than that it's super easy to push out changes as opposed to when you're developing for mobile and you've got to worry about getting approved in the App Store and all that stuff. But I would say just it allows you to release more frequently. So when I worked for the Ministry of Education, we were very loose with our releases. We tried, over the years we tried to get a lot more rigid about it, but at the beginning it was like very much like you make your change, you test it, you get somebody else to approve it, and then you push it, right? It was very very loose. So when you're working with the cloud or working with web technologies, it's definitely a lot easier to get your branches out.
Yeah. And yeah, there's another question. What are the major issues you've encountered while using Xcode as your Git GUI?
That's a good question. At the beginning, I would say now I don't have any issues with it at all. I love it. But when Apple first announced it, it sucked, and it sucked hard. So it was like you ended up having to use the command line a lot of the time anyways. So I never really, a lot of people use source tree or something like that instead, just because when it first was released on Xcode, it was not ready for proper use. But now it's great. There's never been a situation in the last couple of releases that I've thought like, this isn't doing what I need, so.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, anticipating it should integrate well with Xcode Cloud, and that becomes more mainstream. So that might be nice.
Yeah, for sure. To be honest, I've never used Xcode Cloud yet, but one of those things I want to poke around with for sure.
Yeah. And Wendy is asking, can you talk about pull requests? They are mainly when working with others on a project, right?
Yeah, so pull requests.
Projects.
So pull requests aren't actually a feature of Git. That's more like a workflow feature that's built into GitHub or whatever tool you're using. So essentially what a pull request is when you've committed your code to the remote server and you want everybody to take a look at it, then you say, hey, you go into GitHub, you say create pull request, and then you would tell everybody, that's kind of like announcing to your team that you want them to review changes, and then they're going to approve those changes, and then your work gets merged into the main branch. So really, that's all there is to it. It's just a way of announcing that your code is ready to be merged. So
yeah, that's a good question, and yeah, it applies for when you collaborate with others. So yeah, and Wendy is Wendy is replying and saying, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah. So I think, and also, I mean, I was in general like just curious, like since you teach students Swift, do you encourage them also to learn Git and GitHub and stuff?
So it depends on who I'm teaching. The question was, do I encourage them to learn GitHub? Yes, for sure. Yeah. So I run, depending on the student, I've done it for different classes over the semesters. Some students I've run through Git. I had one student whose dad was an iOS developer, and he was super keen on getting him like job skills ready. You know what I mean? So he's like, oh yeah, he's got to learn GitHub. He's got to learn this. He's got to learn all this stuff. So I definitely taught that student Git. Other students, you know, like in the summer, I had a student who was 13, and he's like on a hockey team, and he's like got all these extracurriculars and all that stuff. So I didn't expect him to really learn it. You know, maybe his dad indicated that he wants to sign him up for the advanced course too. So I think once we get to the advanced course with him, we'll do it, because I definitely think it is if you're looking to be job ready, then Git is something you absolutely have to know for being an iOS developer. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's so great. Like students are getting to learn all of this and also Git. So like they're learning the best practices at the earliest. So that's pretty awesome. And I mean, I I cannot imagine now when I think about like not using Git or using some motion control like that. There's another question by Wendy. Do you recommend learning or knowing any other languages that could help with that can help in working with Swift? Like, is Objective-C helpful? And probably if you have had a lot of time.
Yeah. So I think the landscape is slowly changing where you're not going to have to know Objective-C for a lot of jobs. Really depends on the job you're applying for, whether you need to know, Objective-C or not. It doesn't hurt to know multiple languages at all. Really, like a developer, I guess if you're going to become a developer, there's two ways you can do it. You could be a generalist and you can know a little bit about everything, or you could be an expert at one specific topic. So if you say, for example, if you want to just do mobile, just do iOS, and you're going to become, the super expert in that, then knowing Objective-C would be helpful. But if you want to be more of a generalist, and sometimes you want to do some iOS stuff, sometimes you want to do some web stuff or whatever, then learning JavaScript or learning Python or C# or something like that would definitely be helpful too. So it kind of really depends on where you see yourself going as a developer. But with that being said, Swift is an amazing first language to learn. So if this is the first language you're learning, then you've picked a really good one, because it's great. So languages that, C# has been around for must be like over 15 years now, and it's gotten so bloated, and Microsoft is trying to make it like this kind of language that has every feature that you would ever need. And so it's just become this huge mess of a bloated language. Like code that you wrote 5 years ago could look totally different from code from 10 years ago, that sort of thing. So you don't have that to deal with when you're learning Swift. Swift has only been around for a few years, so it doesn't have that trouble where you have to learn like so many different things. So hope that helps.
Yeah, Yeah, I think Swift is a great first language, and probably you can do it just Swift as your main language if you're getting into iOS. Like you can pretty much avoid Objective-C or depending on the job, but yeah. Yeah, and also, do you have any recommendations around resources for like folks who are like beginners getting into learning Git and GitHub and stuff?
Yeah, I was thinking about adding a slide on that actually, but I was just going to mention it. Really, I've never read a book on Git. You can just Google stuff, or the GitHub website has tons of resources on there, and it's super helpful. So if you want to get the basics, go on GitHub's website and learn about, beyond what we've done today. You can learn about more advanced topics there. And then you'll hopefully be at a point where you can just Google stuff that you need to learn about. Or pick. I'm sure there's some great Git books out there. I've just never had the need to read one. So
yeah, and another question here from Wendy, and I'm loving that Wendy has so many questions. So, do you recommend having an Apple developer license?
So, to be honest, I can't even remember what the rules are on the developer license. You need it. You don't need it to test on your device anymore. Like for a really, really long time, if you wanted to test on your device, you needed to have an Apple developer license. So it was kind of like, absolutely, yes, you needed to have one. But now I think you only need it if you're going to be testing, if you're going to be building certain aspects into your project. Like say, for example, let me try to think of an example. Say you want to use, I'm blanking on the name of it. Say you want to use Game Center, right? I believe if you want to build Game Center into your app, you need to use, you need to have a developer license in order to even just test with Game Center. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. Yeah, let us know, Wendy, if that's if you have any more questions. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Thank you again. So yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for answering all these questions. I'm gonna share your SwiftKids link there again.
Thank
and,
you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for all of this, for helping us learn about all these different branching strategies and Git and GitHub. This is just in time for Hacktoberfest and in general for so many of us who are like, getting into it. So yeah, thank you so much. And I hope to see you again.
Yeah, for sure. I hope to do another one of these.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, folks are thanking you here. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you in our next Women Who Code mobile events. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a good Hacktoberfest too, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
See ya.
Yeah. Bye.